Good afternoon, everybody. And it's my pleasure to share with you this afternoon some challenging safe patient handling and mobility scenarios and how to overcome some barriers with these scenarios. I've been privileged to be able to invite several of our industry experts to share real patient scenarios from their facilities with us this afternoon. I'm honoured to invite Nancy McGann and Paige Humphreys from SCL Health in Colorado, and also Manola Bresh from Tampa General Hospital in Florida. Our objectives today are to, number one, discuss how to use safe patient handling mobility technologies in combination to ambulate a patient of size safely for them and for caregivers and in a dignified manner. Two, to discuss how to manage a patient fall scene effectively and safely, utilizing safe patient handling mobility technology. And three, to describe how to use safe patient handling mobility technology to safely move a critically ill, sedated patient in the ICU. SCL Health has 8 hospitals. Good Samaritan is one of these 8 hospitals, and the SPHM program reports to the Safety Mobility Steering Committee. Each site has 2 SPHM lead roles. One is an RN clinical manager, the other is a lead therapist. The Hospital Safe Patient Handling Committee and program was established in 2007, and in 2009 the first 4 lifts were installed in the ICU. Currently, around 80% of the inpatient rooms have ceiling lifts and 100% of the rooms in the ICU. And then there are several mobile lifts of various types. So let's hear from Nancy and Paige about how they accomplished their mobility of their patient safely and with dignity.
So we're excited to share this case study with you because it really exemplifies how safe patient handling technology can make or break the rehabilitation process and the process of healing. I think we know all of our patients with very low mobility levels are quite a challenge to get things going and started. And that becomes an even bigger challenge when someone has a very high BMI. So this is a story from 2017 at SCL Health's Good Samaritan Medical Center in Colorado, and it was a 38-year-old male patient with a BMI of 125, 970 pounds when he was admitted, and he was had a very unclear history of mobility and ADLs, but we do know that he was wedged between his bed and the wall, and his roommate called an ambulance. He was transferred to our hospital from a different one because of his insurance coverage and placed in a bariatric suite. We'll describe that more later. And began PT on day 2 and OT on day 7. And you can see the progression here, facilitated with equipment of log rolling, standing with a vertical tilt bed, and then ended up actually being discharged home after 7 months. And that was because he had to be under 700 pounds to go to any kind of rehab center. And he didn't reach under that weight until just about 7 months later when he was discharged. And instead of going to rehab or a skilled nursing facility, he went home and he was walking independently and up on level ground and stairs. If you want more details on this process and the rehab part, there is an article here referenced from the International Journal of Safe Patient Handling and Mobility that talks more about this. So in this room, we had a bariatric ceiling lift, bariatric sling, bed, commode, everything in this bariatric suite and room. So the patient was placed there. And as you can see here, the bed was made with a repositioned sling, and he was padded up, and you'll see why in just a minute, to help get him facilitated in his mobility. So here he was a little tilted, so we did correct that ultimately. But this is what we were doing initially to get him into different positions, get him out of bed, to turn, and again in an active assistive manner so that he would finish his turn and eventually be able to turn on his own and things like that. But to really get walking going, we needed to do something different. And so what we did initially was we have a bariatric walking sling here, and we used the sling and the lift to place him in that so that we could conserve his energy for the more therapeutic activity, which was going to be learning to be upright again, weight bearing, and then walking. And we worked very specifically on the exact placement, because as we know with a large body habitus, it can be unique in how different slings and things fit each individual. So you can see all the padding that we had on top of him was there to protect his skin and make him comfortable with the ambulation sling. So to get him standing, we really needed to rent a vertical tilt bed and slowly get him up to standing. And that took quite a while. And Paige, who you see here, is his therapist, and she'll talk to you a little more about that. And so you can see the picture on the left, he was really just working on weight bearing. We still had him strapped into the bed, and we had the walking sling and reposition sling on him. Later on, we were able to unstrap him from the bed, and he was really able to do some weight bearing and pre-gait, pre-walking activities. And now you can see where he doesn't need as much padding and he doesn't need the reposition sling anymore. He was able to get into the ambulation sling by moving himself. And at this point, the ambulation sling was used to help him as he got to the edge of the bed. And he did it in a very unique way because of his body habitus. And we had this on him knowing that he wouldn't fall because we would have this ambulation sling supporting him as he went up. And eventually, he progressed to standing with the sling and the lift. Here now he is independent, and would he have gotten here without a vertical tilt bed, without the different technologies of the lift and the walking sling? You know, would we have been able to get that early mobility going when he was so low level without technology when he was 970 pounds? What would have happened to this individual if he didn't have this technology? Would he have made progress? Would he have possibly passed away in our hospital? You know, if he really didn't have a therapist who said, well, let's just get this guy up and let's get the right tools and ask the right questions. And you'll see when you talk to Paige, she was a new grad. She was within a few months of graduating from college and having her first full-time job. But this was her, we got to get this person up. We need more Pages in the healthcare world for these types of individuals. Who are super complex and challenging, but we can still get them up and moving because we now have technology that we didn't have when the late 80s when I became a PT.
My name's Paige Humphreys. I was the therapist that worked primarily with this bariatric patient at Good Samaritan. As Nancy mentioned earlier, I was pretty fresh into my physical therapy career. It was, you know, less than 6 months after graduating from PT school that I had the pleasure of working with this patient. And just really, I feel really grateful to be, you know, at a facility that promotes safety and safe patient handling so much. I had a really good support with my inpatient manager. And then with Nancy here, who was from the system office and has a safe patient handling and physical therapy background herself. So I worked really closely kind of with management and with others in our system to help facilitate getting the appropriate equipment for this patient. And that really helped us on this journey to get him where he needed to be mobility-wise. We did have to rent some of the equipment because we didn't have all of the equipment on hand at our facility, but all of it was easily accessible, and we were able to rent it for kind of the length of time that we needed it. Just a current kind of update on this patient. I did see him 2 years ago. He actually walked into the hospital with his family, and he was not using an assistive device. He, you know, is still living independently in the community, and you know, doing remarkably well. When this patient was discharged, he ended up weighing just under about 700 pounds. So he had lost nearly, you know, almost 300 plus pounds while he was hospitalized. And he went from being essentially bedbound to ambulating on level ground, doing stairs without an assistive device, and independent with all of his ADLs, and able to live independently, cooking, cleaning, doing everything for himself. So I really think that safe patient handling equipment in this instance was, you know, a huge benefit to him, and can be for so many other patients of size, just like this one.
I'm gonna say, you know, I actually approached Paige as his rehab process was going so well and said we should write an article on this. And she looked at me like I was nuts because she didn't think this was a big deal. So this is just what you do which just shows what a hospital that has the culture of safe patient handling and mobility that Good Samaritan and it can breed in our new graduates. It definitely made me smile as someone who's been living and breathing that for many years.
Our next scenario that we're going to talk about is managing a fall scene safely and effectively. There are several barriers we often hear in facilities. We don't have time. Using equipment takes too long. It's easier and quicker just to lift the patient back to bed. So we're going to talk about managing the scene as you would for a cardiac arrest. As a safe patient handling mobility champion, take charge of the safety for all and delegate.
Hi. Hey, I'm here to help. Kim, will you go get the hover mat and go get the compressor? Yes. All right. And we're going to wait for the doctor to get here. Make sure you're not hurt, Jan, okay? At that point, assuming there's no injury, then the crisis is over. She's on the floor. We don't want to leave her here any longer than we need to. We're going to make sure she's comfortable. But we don't have to rush to get her back into bed. We can then take our time to make sure that we do the transfer back to bed safely. If we choose to lift back up manually, even if we have 4, 5, 6 people to do it, the risk to Jan of shoulder pain, picking her up with a sheet, of the discomfort, potentially dropping her, is a risk that is unacceptable for the patient, let alone the risk to the caregivers in terms of shoulders, backs, and injury from doing the lift.
So you'll see here, we're going to play this out in real time so that you can get an idea of how long it actually takes. So we're assuming that the assessment has been done, the patient is able to roll, and if they can roll, we absolutely should have them roll. You'll see us putting under the air mattress so that we can then move her onto an air jacking system to get her back up into bed safely. I hear often from safe patient handling mobility champions that when they get to a fall scene, they will go and get the lift, they'll go and get, whether it's a air jacking system, whether it's a full body lift, whatever the device is, and by the time they get back to the scene, 4 or 5 people have picked the patient up and got them back into bed. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 people, and there is a risk. Many people have been injured performing this task. So what we want to show you today is in real time how long it actually takes to get this person back up into bed. And if you care to do so, you can take this recording, you can go back and time it. The whole process of getting the air system, hooking the patient up, getting them onto the jacking system, takes about 2.5 minutes. Once you are good at it, please be aware, it does take time to develop this skill. It takes time to make sure you know where to put the patient on the middle of the mattress, the hooking up the straps. But as you can see here, each chamber takes about 10 seconds to fully inflate. And if you think about this from a comfort and dignity perspective of the patient, if they have had any kind of potential injury or any pain from the fall, this way of getting them back into bed is going to be the most comfortable for them. And notice how much lifting the caregivers are doing. Everybody is safe in this scenario. And it really doesn't take very long. The key is to make sure you know where the equipment is, that it's functioning, and you delegate. Kim, go get the hover jack, go get the air compressor, just as you would with an AED. Now, if the patient cannot be rolled, if you're not sure if there's an injury, this is a way to get an air mattress in underneath a patient when they're on the floor. We've folded it and sandwiched it between two friction-reducing devices. And this is two paramedics responding to a patient fall at home. The other way that you can get a patient safely up from the floor is to use a repositioning or a full body sling and either a ceiling lift if the patient has fallen in an area where the ceiling lift will go, or you can use a floor-based lift. You're now seeing a seated sling. This is a split leg sling, so we're crisscrossing the legs, and then we're bringing in a floor-based lift. Now, usually you are going to have two people performing this task. One person would bring the lift in. We're being very, very careful with the base of the lift around the patient's head. For the purposes of this video, we only had one person, and my husband very kindly volunteered to be a patient in this scenario. But this will show you how you can bring a ceiling lift or a floor-based lift in and safely manage that lift. You always want to be watching the base to make sure that the patient is safe and that their head is supported. You're going to hook up the seated sling, or you can use a repositioning sling for this same function. And then you're going to be with the patient as you raise them up, checking the sling, making sure nothing is pinching, making sure that they are comfortable as it is lifting them up. And then as you bring the lift in towards the bed, the patient can help if they are able. Now, it is much easier to do this floor recovery using a seated sling if you have a ceiling lift, because you don't have to manage the base of the lift. Some facilities will mandate two people to do any kind of lift away from the bed, but other facilities will allow you to do it with one person. Check your facility policy to determine how many people your facility requires for you to do this safely. We're going to have the patient cross their arms over their chest. And again, we're checking as the patient comes up and as we're getting them back into bed. This last one you're going to see is a patient who's fallen at home. This is another type of lift that helps get the patient up. And again, you'll see here, they're not injured. The medics have assessed them. So they're using a slide sheet to actually have the patient come out and move themselves onto this lift. It's called an indie lift. And you'll see here that you can strap the patient in. They're sitting on the lift, and then basically the lift just powers them up into a seated position. So in this short video, in less than 10 minutes, we've shown 4 different ways to safely recover a patient from the floor. The key is to take charge of the scenario. You go get the lift, go get the floor-based lift, go get the hover mat, go get the indie lift. You as the champion remain in place to safely manage the lift. Our last scenario that we're going to share with you today is on moving patients who are sedated in the ICU.
Good afternoon. My name is Manon Labreche. I am a physical therapist. I'm the injury prevention manager for Tampa General Hospital. I've been at Tampa General now for almost 27 years, and I've been overseeing our safe patient handling program now for 22 years. So before I get started on this unique case, I'm just going to describe our hospital so you have a better idea of our center. Tampa General Hospital is a 1,000-bed hospital. It's a level 1 trauma center, magnet certified, as well as bariatric center of excellence. We've had an injury prevention program now for 22 years, which includes myself as the manager. I also have a 2-person ergonomic team that handles all the office and manual handling ergonomic evaluations. We've also had a lift or injury prevention team for 20 years. We'll be celebrating our anniversary in March of this year. So we've had that team for 20 years, and they are available 24/7 to help with some of the more complex cases as it pertains to safe patient handling. Over 500 beds here at Tampa General that have a ceiling lift tracks. All of our ICUs currently have a track over each bed, so we have 12 ICU units. We also have various lift equipment on each unit, such as floor lift, motorized sit-to-stand device, standing aids, air-assisted technology, as well as disposable slide sheets and gait belt. We also have a unit peer program that runs every quarter, where we have leaders specifically trained in each department to help us drive our culture of safety forward. I also get involved with new constructions and renovations. And if you look at the picture on the bottom right, that's one of our most recent ICU additions. So in that 36-bed unit, you can see we have a full room system with a permanent motor in each room. So that's wonderful that we're able to collaborate with our facilities and our design team and have the support for that for any new construction. We also educate all new team members upon hire. They have a 90-minute class where we have some hands-on demonstration with how to use the lift equipment. We also have various resources on our webpage and training videos. And I participate in every committee that I can. So I try to attend our falls committee, a wound care, education council, new construction, etc. So just to kind of give you an overview of our comprehensive program. We've reduced our injuries in the last 20 years by 78%. So we've had a 78% reduction in safe patient handling injuries and over 90% reduction in cost. So that gives you just an overview of Tampa General Hospital. Our team, they used to be called LIFT team, but they're the injury prevention team. They get consulted on some of the more complex cases. So the case I'm going to talk to you about today was one case in particular. They have cases like this almost every day where they really have to be creative and you really use their clinical judgment and their experience with the equipment and try to troubleshoot some of these more difficult, complex tasks. So the case I'm going to talk to you about today was a physician requesting he wanted to do a thoracentesis on an ICU patient who was ventilated and completely dependent and sedated. He wanted the patient to sit on the edge of the bed, and he requested for 2 nurses to stand in front of that patient to manually hold the patient during this procedure, which was to take place in the patient's room in the ICU. And of course, the 2 nurses immediately said, no, we don't manually lift patients here at Tampa General. Let me call the injury prevention team to see what we can come up with so that we don't have to manually hold the patient during this procedure. So that's when they contacted our team to try to troubleshoot the situation. And what we end up doing, we utilized a ceiling lift to move this patient. And you can see this is the back of the patient. So the patient had multiple tubes in line, was completely sedated. We utilized the ceiling lift in the room and hoisted him up. And what we tend to do in ICU is kind of bundle all the tubes in line on one side to make the lift a little bit more efficient so nothing is getting disconnected. Then we moved the patient. We sat him on the edge of the bed. We put a table in front of him and propped him up on pillows. And once he was steady, and you can see in this picture, we elevated the head of the bed as well and put some pillows there to support all the tubes in line while we were positioning the patient forward. We also placed a little footstool underneath him so his feet would be resting on something and he wouldn't be sliding off the bed, so that he was in a little bit better of a position. And once we knew he was in a good position, what we did at that point is we loosened up the sling and we were able to lower the head of the bed. And then we attached the sling. We reattached the sling. So you'll see in the next picture, we reattached the sling underneath the arms. And you can see the carry bar of the ceiling lift there. We went underneath the arms and hooked it back up so that the patient was now supported anteriorly and was not going to fall. And then we lowered the sling a little bit more, and you can see how we had the patient propped it up on pillows. So really, this was a huge win for our team to be able to do that. The physician commented, he was a little resistant at first, really not understanding why the nurses didn't want to hold the patient for the, what he was explaining as an hour procedure by the time he prepped the patient. So rather than using 2 nurses, we really only had 1 nurse in the room assisting with the procedure. And the physician was able to perform this procedure in half the amount of time. He was just so thrilled. And now anytime we have this physician requests our assistant, this is how we position the patient. So it was much more time efficient for the physicians. There was no manual lifting done at all from any of the nurses. And it did free up some of our nursing staff, because initially they were going to have 2 nurses support the patient and then 1 nurse assisting with the procedure. So now we were able to free up 2 nurses, and we really sustained no injuries during this procedure.
To summarize, every facility has challenging situations that may require some out-of-the-box thinking. We must practice our skills to be ready for application to challenging scenarios. And the way we do this is by embracing a culture of safety, a culture of mobility. No matter where you are on your journey, if you are just starting out today, make a commitment to phase in more and more equipment over the next several years until you reach that 100% coverage. You heard both Nancy and Paige and Minot share that they didn't get to that level by only having 1 or 2 lifts here or there in their facility. If you have a few lifts, commit to getting more. And then lastly, interdisciplinary teamwork, including the vendors, is paramount to success. I have a huge thank you to Nancy McGann, Paige Humphreys, Manola Brash, and to all of you for attending this webinar today.